what I think is the most beautiful moment in the whole season. Exciting possibilities here for what this is going to do to the public perception of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Despite some of the good that the show unwittingly might do, it feels very harmful, it feels exploitative. Like, at any point did the producers say, ooh, maybe we took it too far? I came away feeling like the villain of the show was not Demi or any of the girls, but is Secret Lives of Mormon Wives good for the Mormon Church? This is the big question. Season 2 just barely dropped this last week, and social media is abuzz with reactions, especially when it comes to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, sometimes known as the Mormon Church. And I'm a Latter-day Saint creator. I've got opinions, and so today we're going to be talking about those, particularly the question of whether this is actually a good show or not. A good show in terms of television, but also for the church. And actually, my opinion might surprise you on that. So is this a good show at representing the Latter-day Saint faith? No, and I'm going to explain why. There's a lot of mischaracterizations. But even beyond that, is it a good show for the church? That depends, I think. If we're talking about, like, is it good for church members to watch? No, it's got, like, content warning here. It's got a lot of salacious material. It's trash reality TV, but I don't think anyone going into a reality TV show feels like they're going to come out being a better person. That's just the nature of the genre. But as far as the church's goals of, spreading the gospel, I actually think it has some potential there. And I'm going to go into explaining why I think that is. Now, is it a good show? That I actually think the answer is no. And not just from a Latter-day Saint perspective, but from like a TV perspective, a reality TV perspective, I feel like this show was disappointing. And at the end of it, I came away feeling like the villain of the show was not Demi or any of the girls, but the Hulu producers who made this. This show, I walked away feeling like it was particularly exploitative and harmful towards the girls and towards the messaging that they were trying to get across. So I'm going to go into explaining that today, why I think that this show ultimately was just not a good TV show and is potentially harmful. Not even as a Latter-day Saint, just bad TV as a human being. But of course, it's no surprise that Hulu really wanted to lean into the show, especially the Latter-day Saint aspect of the show or the Mormon aspect of the show, because it's what I call cult spectacle. There's something just really intriguing and drawing about trying to learn more about this conservative religion that maybe isn't super well known or has obscure practices, especially when it's combined with a swinging scandal on TikTok. And so it's no mystery why Hulu wanted to really lean into this. The question is, how well did they actually do that at tying together a really compelling story? And is this even a good thing to do? So before I get into my analysis, we need to do a quick recap of MomTok and Season 1 of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, so we're all on the same page. If you've already seen Season 1 and you're good, feel free to skip ahead to my analysis later. So first, MomTok. MomTok is a phenomenon that started in like 2020-ish on TikTok. It was started primarily by Taylor Frankie Paul. She is a mega influencer, and she started this group around the hashtag MomTok, where it was a bunch of Latter-day Saint women getting together. And it was all about like creating this image of like, we're women, we're empowering each other, we're getting together, and this is not your mom's mom talk. This is like, we're cool. We're not just like these stuffy, prudish Mormons or Latter-day Saints. We are like a new generation, and we're pushing boundaries, and we're like throwing away stereotypes. And this group became viral on its own because, again, you're combining like this conservative religion with something that is like has an undertone of being salacious and scandalous. But then it became really scandalous when the swinging scandal broke. But all of a sudden, Taylor Frankie Paul starts making posts on TikTok about how she's like separated from her husband. She's having to move, and people are wondering what the heck is going on until she gets on a live stream on TikTok and basically reveals that she has been swinging, soft swinging, which basically means you don't go all the way. But she broke the soft rules and So her and her husband their marriage was falling apart. But in addition, she confessed on this live stream that everyone in MomTok was doing it. All of the wives were swinging. Of course, then this just went ablaze. Everyone on social media was going crazy about what is happening with these Latter-day Saint women and their personal intimate lives. And then some of the other members of MomTok started going on and denying all of it. Like, no, we weren't involved. None of us were involved. And so that just fueled the controversy of who was involved, what really happened. And so it was no surprise that Hulu swooped down on this and picked up the story super fast to make a show about it, because I mean, that's as juicy as the tea gets. And so they made a show, The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, and the big poll was everyone's like, oh, are we finally going to find out what really happened in that swinging scandal? They're finally going to spill the tea. And so that leads us to season 1. And the plot of season 1 was definitely around like trying to figure out what happened with the swinging scandal. There was a little bit of a rivalry between two of the main cast members, Taylor and Whitney. And there's also this division of the sinners versus the saints. And that was kind of the real plot driver, I feel like, and probably one of my least favorite aspects of season 1. The real disappointment of season 1 is you never actually figure out what's going on with the swinging scandal. They talk about it a little bit, but there's never like a big reveal of what actually happened. But that story is kind of just woven throughout the whole season. Then there's this competition between Whitney and Taylor. Whitney feels like she is or should be the leader of MomTok, and everyone else really disagrees with that. And so by the end of the season, she gets kicked out of MomTok. And season 2 is kind of her redemption story. She's no longer the villain. It's kind of a coming back story for her within MomTok. And then you've got the sinner versus saints dynamic. And this is the one that I think drives a lot of the season. It starts off with Jen Affleck's husband graduated from college, so she invites her friends over for a graduation party, and some of the MomTok girls start drinking, and she's really uncomfortable with that because it's her parents' house. That causes drama. And so then when Jen has her baby blessing, she doesn't invite the sinner camp, and she only invites the saints camp. And that kind of creates some drama and all of that. So that is the main framing of it. And it was a very entertaining show. It clearly did very well on Hulu. Obviously, as a Latter-day Saint, I didn't love seeing my faith represented that way. There were like squabbles I had about some of the ways the girls explained the church. I felt like they weren't always accurately representing the beliefs or practices of the church, but it was a hit success. So they were renewed for season 2. So that brings us to season 2. I have a lot of thoughts on how this season went, but I do want to focus on a few things that I thought actually were really surprising and impressive. There were some things that were an improvement over season 1 when it comes to its portrayal of the church. And a very simple example is in season 1, whenever they would cut to end a scene, they would cut it with tons of B-roll of Catholic stained glass and crosses that are just clearly you knew nothing about what being a Latter-day Saint actually represents because just the imagery was off. This season, they were a lot more diligent at making sure all the imagery they showed was Latter-day Saint coded, temples everywhere. Every single scene was cut with a temple. A lot of the Orem temple got a ton of screen time, but the Provo City Center temple, Payson temple, all of that. So lots of temples, lots of good stuff in that regard as far as accurately reflecting the spirit of who a Latter-day Saint is. So they did a few things well, and even there were some genuinely inspiring moments. I teared up at a few points, I'm almost embarrassed to say. And there was one that was even pretty shocking to me to see that on screen, that they were willing to go to that point. So the problems I had with season 1 about its framing of the church really was about that sinner versus saint dynamic. Because what ended up happening was you had these girls divided into 2 camps, basically the Latter-day Saints and the not Latter-day Saints. And what do you know, by the end of the season, all the villains are the Latter-day Saints, and all the kind and tolerant and non-judgmental people are the sinners. And I would disagree with that framing because, I think it's just not very representative of who Latter-day Saints are. Sure, there are tons of judgmental Latter-day Saints, and there are tons of people who are judgmental who are not of our faith. And so I feel like they just kind of typecast a lot of the Latter-day Saints in their edit of the show. And I think season 2 makes it crystal clear that you don't have to be a member of the church to be extremely judgmental, because I think that was a big message of season 2. Some of the girls just get really, really harsh in their interactions with these girls on both sides. Which brings us to some of the things I thought were really good in season 2, or I should say just better than season 1. The first one is Whitney's birth. So like I said, Whitney is no longer in the villain jail. She, in this season, is having this redemption story where she's a little bit more understanding. She's trying to make up with these girls. She is trying to get back into MomTok. And so as part of that, they show her giving birth in the hospital. At the end of season 1, she was pregnant, and in this season, she's pregnant too, or extremely pregnant, about to pop, and then she gives birth in the hospital. And while you see the scene in the hospital, they have the footage of the actual hospital birth scene, and there's a voiceover where Whitney's kind of explaining her thoughts in all of this. And she says that giving birth is the greatest miracle, the greatest blessing anyone can experience. It's the closest I feel to heaven. Every time I hold a baby or children, I'm reminded that this is what matters. And this is supposed to be an emotional moment in the show. She is crying, her husband's crying, the baby's crying, everyone's crying because that's how births go. And she's talking about how it's the closest to heaven she ever feels is going through childbirth. Now, that resonates a lot with me because I think that motherhood is incredibly divine, incredibly powerful. And that moment of holding that baby is just world shattering. It will change your life forever, and it changes the meaning of everything. And I feel like having a faith, having the Latter-day Saint faith to give me context to that, reshapes how I feel about motherhood. Because the thing is that Latter-day Saints view motherhood as the highest calling you can have on earth. And in the show, that's often used as like a punchline to say how regressive the Latter-day Saint faith is, that motherhood is, only motherhood is what women do. Only motherhood is your highest calling. But in the Latter-day Saint view, there's a reason we say that. It's because we believe that women and men, when they procreate, that is taking part in the process of creation. And that is a God-like power. That is what God does. He creates life. So the fact that he gives that gift to men and women who are sealed in the temple and who are part of the new and everlasting covenant is a powerful thing. And it's a role that women specifically have stewardship over and that we get a special connection with. And so I do think that the closest you can be to heaven is that process of bringing life into this world. Now, that's not to say that everyone has a positive birthing experience or mothering experience. Those experiences are diverse and everyone goes through different challenges. But the church and the gospel of Jesus Christ, I think, helps women and mothers contextualize why this is so beautiful, powerful, and important. And I love that the show was able to showcase just a little bit of that by Whitney essentially bearing her witness that motherhood is divine. And this is a beautiful thing that gives me meaning and purpose, and it brings me closer to heaven, closer to God. That brings me to Taylor. This is episode 1, right out of the gate, as her relationship with her boyfriend Dakota is falling apart. She says something that was absolutely shocking to me to hear from her mouth on Hulu. But what she says, as her relationship's falling apart, she has a new baby with him, she's still getting repercussions from the swinging scandal. She says, in our faith, we were taught to wait for the person we wanted to marry and end up with. And I feel like if I hadn't been sleeping with him that early on, I wouldn't have been as hurt. And that's why it's a guideline. It would have prevented those things from happening. Like I said, I was really pleasantly surprised for her to say that, to even tacitly admit that there is some merit to the church's teachings about chastity. Now, the law of chastity, on its bare bones, is that men and women aren't supposed to have sexual relations outside of marriage. That means, chastity before marriage and being loyal to the marriage covenant once you are married. Obviously, on this show, there is a ton of sexual content because it's about swinging. It's about sexual liberation. It's about fighting against Mormon sexual repression, which I think is an unfair characterization. And so to have kind of the hedonism of season 1 unfold and then season 2 open up and you see the fallout of that, you see Taylor really struggling with her marriage, with balancing motherhood, with still dealing with the fallout of her previous marriage. And then to say, you know what, there was something to this idea that you should wait for marriage was really interesting for her to say. I was proud of her for saying that. I thought that was really cool. As Latter-day Saint, as I'm seeing these girls' lives fall apart and a lot of them hit rock bottom, I can't help but feel that, obeying the law of chastity does help in some ways to avoid some heartache, to avoid some hurt. But the reality is it's not just about the rules. It is about just like your whole mentality as a Latter-day Saint. And I feel like season 1 focused so much on the rules, like Latter-day Saints can't do this, they can do this. And because they can't do that, they're judgy if you don't do this. So it focused so much on the rules, but ultimately Latter-day Saints believe that the rules are just a means to an end. They're guidelines, they're commandments to help us achieve our best selves. Ultimately, our goal is to love God and love thy neighbor as thyself. Those are just the 2 greatest commandments, and everything else are appendages to it, as Jesus said. So all of it is to just help us become someone who is really good at loving God and loving your neighbor. The other thing I thought was really interesting and even inspiring was seeing how in this season they used and referenced God and faith more to get through hard times. And that leads me to the final one, which honestly I think is the most inspiring part of the whole show. This is in the season finale. What I think is the most beautiful moment in the whole season is this moment where Macy brings Michaela with her to Spanish Fork Canyon, to the crash site of Macy's ex-boyfriend who died there while she was in college. So what happened is Macy was a sophomore at BYU, Brigham Young University, a church-owned school, when she got pregnant with her boyfriend. And this is against the honor code at BYU, so she would have been facing all sorts of, worries, struggles, scandal. It would have been a really hard situation. But then on top of that, she broke up with her boyfriend, and very shortly afterwards, her boyfriend died in a car crash. So very conflicting emotions. It would have been an awful time. I'm sure she struggled a ton. And then she's still having to give birth to this child, raise this child. She eventually gets remarried and has lived a fulfilled life. But in this episode, she wants to go to the crash site to have some closure because she's never done that before. And so she takes Michaela with her. Like I said, Michaela has not been a practicing active believer for many years, but she goes with Macy to support her as a friend. They go to the crash site. It's really emotional. They give flowers. They put like a note, some memorabilia. And then Michaela asks if she can give a prayer. And so she does. She prays like a very Latter-day Saint prayer in that moment. And I thought that was really beautiful, to be honest, to have someone who doesn't necessarily believe, doesn't necessarily practice, but just because she wants to support her friend is willing to reach out and offer something of faith to that friend in a way that would resonate with her by praying in a very Latter-day Saint way. And it was beautiful. And I loved seeing that on film because that was an example not of the faith being used as a weapon to show how destructive or harmful it is, but using the faith as a way to say how it can help people heal. It can help people grapple with grief. It can help people grow. And it can be an inspiring, beautiful, connecting thing. It was connecting these 2 people from different traditions or different faiths or levels of belief into a moment that brought them closer through that grief and through a connection with God. Loved it. All right, so those were some high points of what I thought the show did somewhat well in representing the church, but there's also another aspect to this that I think might even be more impactful. Macy goes on the show and says that I think MomTok has been a positive impact for the Mormon community. Now, I actually do agree with her a little bit. Probably not in the ways that she's thinking. I don't necessarily think it's a positive reflection of our faith. I don't think that we should be endorsing like covenant breaking and the salaciousness and the vulgarity, all of that. Don't endorse that. That's not what we teach on Sunday. But in a different way, I think there are some exciting possibilities here for what this is going to do to the public perception of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The reality is that whenever the church is in the headlines, curiosity about the church increases. In 2012, Mitt Romney was running for president. There was the Book of Mormon musical, all sorts of other stories going on involved with Latter-day Saints. And if you track that on Google Trends, you'll see the graph go up around that time when Mormon and Church of Jesus Christ was trending. And if you then coordinate that with the church's stats on membership growth, you will see there is actually a little spike around 2012 when interest around the church was growing, even though most of the coverage about the church was negative or it was controversial. It was not just sunny and rosy coverage about the church. It was pretty polarizing, and yet just the interest in the church led to curiosity about our beliefs. And for at least a small subsection of people, that led to conversion. And I think that is amazing. It's the old adage that all publicity is good publicity. And I think the same holds true here. Lots of people are tuning into Secret Lives. This is a major hit, one of the top performing shows on Hulu in season 1, and I predict it probably is going to do okay for season 2. And with all of that increased interest in the church, I suspect there'll probably be missionary potential as well. But the other thing about this is it also breaks some very deeply rooted stereotypes people have had about the church forever. A lot of the coverage we're seeing on these TV shows is reinforcing stereotypes about Latter-day Saints being very conservative, traditional, maybe even prudish, patriarchal, oppressed. You know, they don't like having fun. I mean, you name it, I've heard it as far as what Latter-day Saints are and what they do. And yet you have this complete contrast where these girls are doing the opposite of what you would expect a Latter-day Saint to do. And obviously, as I've said, that's not necessarily representative of the faith, but it is definitely expanding people's perceptions of what a Latter-day Saint can be. Despite some of the good that the show unwittingly might do, I think it has actually caused some deep harm. Not just harm in the sense of the way it portrays the church, but in the ways it's ruining these girls' lives. But even just from a storytelling perspective and a reality TV perspective, I felt like the show was disappointing in some ways. So first, the Latter-day Saint stuff. There was still a lot of jabs about like the church being patriarchal. We're trying to fight against the patriarchy and the church is oppressive to women. Jen says at one point, within the Mormon church, it's expected for the women to be submissive to their husbands. Today, the church is really emphatic that men and women are equal partners. Quentin L. Cook, who is an apostle in the Latter-day Saint Church, said in 2011, "Our doctrine is clear. Women are daughters of our Heavenly Father who loves them. Wives are equal to their husbands. Marriage requires a full partnership where wives and husbands work side by side to meet the needs of the family." So from a church perspective, they're really passionate about teaching that men and women are equal. Now, that doesn't mean that every woman in the church has had that experience. It doesn't mean that the church hasn't tried to improve its messaging over time. But as far as the doctrine itself, we try our best to just be equal, men and women, and serving in our different responsibilities. Another thing that they hit on a lot was a stigma towards divorce in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Several times they talked about divorce. You had Layla, she is recently divorced, and then Jen is considering divorce with her husband, and she's hesitant about that. At one point, Michaela says, people put up with a lot more in their marriages in the Mormon church because it's frowned upon to get divorced. Now, I mean, I'll say that Latter-day Saints believe very strongly in the importance of marriage and the divinity of the marriage unit, and so it's a very serious decision to decide to get divorced. But that doesn't mean that we think you're a bad person if you get divorced. That doesn't mean that it's completely off the table. There are scenarios that absolutely justify or necessitate separating from your marriage. And I do think as a church, we've come a long way in making sure that our messaging is clear, that we are to love and accept everyone regardless of where they are on their journey and on their path. But the church is also pretty clear that marriage is important, but we need to love those who have gone through difficult times. President Nelson himself said that if a couple in your ward gets divorced, or a young missionary returns home early, or a teenager doubts his testimony, they do not need your judgment. They need to experience the pure love of Jesus Christ reflected in your words and actions. Okay, now I want to go into why I think the show itself just did not land for me from a storytelling perspective, from a TV perspective, because it really just did not live up to what I think reality TV attempts to do. And I'll admit, disclaimer, I'm not a huge reality TV show watcher, so I'm not an expert or connoisseur on this genre, but I feel like in general, Reality TV succeeds if it does one of these things. Like, it's got to either be a competition, like you've got Bachelor or Survivor, where the plot is surrounding this structure where there's a goal at the end, a prize. And so all of the drama and all of the plot surrounds like getting to that prize and like kicking other people out and betrayals and alliances for that goal. So there's like a plot driver. Or it's maybe episodic and there's just like a goal for each episode. But it's around a specific theme and you're constantly getting a new cast of characters. I'm thinking of things like Say Yes to the Dress. That one is like, the plot is we got to get this bride to find the dress they're looking for. That's like the plot climax. And what makes it interesting is you're constantly having like a new cast of characters with a new story every single episode. And that leads to the final one, which is it's got to have some sort of escapism to it, like some out of reach fantasy element that even though it's reality TV, you know it's not really your reality. And so like things like extravagant dresses on Say Yes to the Dress, or in the case of like the Kardashians, that one isn't like competition driven and it's not a rotating cast of characters. It's just like one family. But what makes that so appealing, or Real Housewives of Salt Lake City so appealing, is that there is a complete out of this world extravagance to it, that it's just like unattainable for you as a normal person to enjoy what they're enjoying or to participate in that kind of infighting, because it's just, they live in a different class, different socioeconomic world. And so you can kind of escape and be like, oh yeah, if I had millions of dollars to be throwing parties, I'd be doing that too. But Secret Lives of Mormon Wives doesn't do any of those things. And I feel like that ultimately is kind of its downfall of not being entertaining TV. Because it's not a competition to drive the plot. There's not a rotating cast of new characters and stories to drive the plot. And these women are not out of this world extravagant. It's kind of this weird middle ground where they're a little bit living a life that you don't live, but it's not like a completely unattainable life that you could never live. And so there's an element of relatability to it, which is great, but it kind of takes away some of the sizzle and allure of constantly wanting to watch that over and over again. And so there's just that as a premise. The only thing that can drive the plot in those stories is the drama with the girls, and it's the same girls. And the stakes are so incredibly low. There's no like competition you're winning. There's no like giant party that's gonna fall apart if with millions of dollars on the line. Like, it's just like we're going on a girls' trip and we're having another argument. And then we're throwing a Halloween party and we had another argument, and we're eating breakfast together and having another argument. And like, I personally feel like that kind of cycle gets a little old after a while, gets a little stale. And what that ended up doing is incentivizing more and more and more pettiness in the drama and raising the stakes in a way that didn't increase interest in the show, but absolutely destroyed these girls' lives. And I feel like that's what was different between season 1 and season 2, is because in season 1, the carrot that was being dangled the whole time is like, we're gonna finally find out what happened with the swinging scandal. And the reality is they never actually solved that problem. They talk about it a little bit, but you never come away from season 1 feeling like you got the answer to that. And so they dangle the carrot again in season 2, like, we're finally gonna know what happens with the swinging scandal. And then it kind of all comes out after episode 3, and then that's it. Like, the tension's dissolved. What are we here for after that? And so the only thing that the showrunners have to keep increasing that tension and the storytelling excitement is by escalating the fighting and the bickering in order to create an artificial sense of drama. And that brings me to what I think is maybe the most tragic use case of this in season 2, is the deterioration of Jen and Zach's marriage. I am personally of the opinion that that was supposed to be the main plot driver of season 2. Maybe I'm wrong, but it felt like that's kind of what it was trying to gear up towards, that we're gonna see their marriage fall apart and that's gonna be so juicy. Instead, it ends up feeling pretty icky. I felt like it felt really violating to watch them have just legitimate breakdowns over their marriage falling apart. It was, really appalling to see, and I just felt so sad for them, not like hooked to the show, but just like, oh, I'm so sorry that you're doing this on camera. And the producers foiled that plot. I don't think they could deliver on that plot they were hoping for because they pushed it too far. At the end of season 1, Jen and her husband kind of had an explosive fight because the girls went to Vegas, and Jen went with the girls to a Chippendale show, which is basically a burlesque show, something most Latter-day Saints would not be comfortable with. And when her husband found out, he was upset, which, at least in my opinion, is a fairly reasonable thing for a husband to be upset about, regardless of if you're a Latter-day Saint or not. And so they got into a fight. He was threatening to divorce her. It was really messy, and the girls were reacting, I think, pretty poorly, saying that he's being abusive, he's being controlling, and they were trying to have an intervention to get them to divorce and to split up. So all of that, his, very inflammatory, poor reaction to all of that, her choices, the girls' interference, essentially led to season 2, their marriage falling apart. Jen and Zach are separated at the beginning of the season, and they're both going through like a faith crisis. They're stepping away from the church. It's really ugly. In the midst of all of that, she tests positive for pregnancy, and it is devastating to her. She's really stressed, and she has a breakdown that she found out she's actually pregnant because she doesn't know if her marriage is going to last. She is in the middle of pressure of filming this TV show. She's getting pressure from her supposed friends who are trying to break up her marriage, and she's trying to fight for her marriage and try to resolve it. All of this is happening when she gets that pregnancy test. And so it's comes in stark contrast to Whitney's story, where she is in that same episode giving birth, having this beautiful experience, and then Jen is experiencing a lot of sadness and distress over adding one more stressor to her life, and also feeling guilt about it because motherhood is supposed to be a wonderful, beautiful thing, and all she can feel is scared about what's going to happen in the future. And I don't blame her. That's a really scary situation to be in. But as a viewer, I just watched all of that unfold, and it just felt so sad. It felt so sad that these girls were interfering in her marriage, and that the showrunners are, blasting this online. And the reality is, an important piece of context that not as many people appreciate is that Jen was not a part of the original MomTok. Like, she is not actually friends with these girls, at least not originally. She, from what I understand, auditioned for the show and was an influencer before, but wasn't part of that friend circle. And so it's one thing for a girl to go do something her husband's mad about, like go to a Chippendale show, and have these girls come and say, hey, we're your friends, we care about you, we don't think that this is a good relationship for you. But it's another thing entirely when it's not really a group of girls you trust or know that well, and they're saying, no, you definitely should push your sexual boundaries. No, you definitely should do something that your husband wouldn't be comfortable with, and then get mad at you when your husband is upset about that. I feel like it's just putting her in an unfair situation where these girls are pretending to be your friends, but they really don't have much rapport. And instead, the show is editing it and framing it in a way that it's really like the repressive Latter-day Saint church that created this problem, when really she was just trying to hold to her boundaries, her marital boundaries, her sexual boundaries. And then there were these girls who were trying to push those, and it created a big mess, and the showrunners and producers are just blasting that online. Now, I want to be clear, no one's putting a weapon to these girls' heads to display their lives online. They had full agency to do this. They signed those contracts. They are getting compensated handsomely for this. But at the same time, I do feel like the showrunners have some accountability, especially considering what actually happened to Jen after. Because it wasn't just like, oh, my marriage is falling apart, that's really sad and hard to do. She got to the point where she wanted to end her life. That is the point of the show in episode 6, where she says, I am basically having some ideation and I'm in a really, really dark place. Then it cuts to black, and there's a title card that says, out of respect for Jen's privacy, production has made the decision to stop filming with her at this time so she can focus on her mental health. At any point did the producers say, ooh, maybe we took it too far? Or, did we just do a bad? Because there's a lot of factors going on here. Obviously, Jen made these choices, and her husband made these choices, and the girls made these choices. And add pregnancy, hormones, possible prenatal depression, all of that is going to compound. But to get to the point where a cast member is being pitted against her faith, being pitted against her husband in order for the sake of views and drama and clicks, to the point where she wants to end herself, feels very wrong to me. It feels very harmful. It feels exploitative of this girl's life, of this girl's faith, of her marriage. And it feels ick. And it really comes to a head in episode 3 because there's this Halloween party where after the Chippendales explosion in season 1, Jesse and Demi want to push the boundary again and basically bring Chippendales to their house for a Halloween party, and specifically like bring Jen up on stage and have these men dance on her in a very suggestive way. There's a lot of drama around this one, a lot of he said, she said this, she lied, she gave partial consent, didn't give full consent, whatever. There was a lot of murkiness in this situation, but at the end of the day, I still feel like that put them in a very uncomfortable situation to have her boundaries being crossed, and then for the show and the girls to get mad at her and mad at her husband when they took offense at that. It just felt wrong to me. Oh, and then in episode 9 was what I think was the worst egregious example of this, of just really exploiting these girls' most personal, intimate lives in order to get views and to make it more exciting and juicy. And that is in episode 9. They're on a girls' trip and they do pregnancy test roulette. And if you've never heard of that, no one's heard of that. This is a made-up game that the producers made in order to make this more spicy, more exciting. So basically the idea is they're on a girls' trip. Layla comes out and is like, girls, I've got all these pregnancy tests and we're gonna play a pregnancy test roulette game. So everyone go get a cup. You're gonna take your pregnancy test. We're all gonna come back and put them in a bowl, and then we'll go around a circle and everyone will pull one out and we'll see if someone in the group is pregnant. Because it's like, oh, someone in this group is always pregnant. Someone's bound to be pregnant right now. And this put everyone in a bind. And so the background of this is that Macy had just barely found out that she was pregnant. She had been going through IVF, and finally their IVF was successful, and she found out she was pregnant before going on this girls' trip. And she obviously wanted to make that announcement in her way. Michaela also just found out that she was pregnant. And then Demi finally revealed in a prior episode that she's been struggling with fertility for 4 years. The producers knew all of these pieces of information when they decided, hey, it would be really, really great if we could get all of these people to be, exploding their pregnancies in front of each other. So it comes out that, wow, Macy's actually pregnant, Michaela's actually pregnant, and they're upset because they wanted to make the announcement in their own way, and instead they felt like that was just thrust upon them. And also they're feeling awful for even having this announcement, because as soon as Demi picks up the pregnancy test and sees that someone in the group is actually pregnant, and she had just been revealing her struggles with infertility, she just breaks down. She just starts crying, and it's this really just tender, sad, awful thing to witness, that clearly this was something that hurt her so bad, to see all of these pregnancy tests just be popping up like crazy when she's struggled with that. It felt cruel. It felt like a really cruel joke on all of them, that the girls who were pregnant and were excited to share that had that moment taken away from them and then felt guilty for even being happy about it. And the girl who was struggling to get pregnant, it was very triggering for her. So it was a cruel joke that the producers played that did not need to happen, but of course they did, because, you want views, you want clicks, you want drama. Okay, so ultimately, I felt like this show felt ugly. It felt like there was no driving plot goal. There was no new cast member interest. And so from a storytelling perspective, it felt a little bit stale. But then also it felt like the stakes weren't like win this prize or find this dress or throw this party. The stakes were marriages and children and families and faith being thrown apart, crumbling, deteriorating. And so the reality is the stakes are the highest stakes that there could possibly be, but it felt like the show just trivialized all of it. And so it felt very uninteresting, which is just a really sad, weird conundrum to be in. But there were some high points. There were even some inspiring points. Like I said, with Macy's story, talking about her growth and dealing with grief and then connecting over that grief with her friend through prayer was really, really cool. So I have a lot of grace for what those girls are dealing with and going through, but I do think they need to hold some accountability for how their actions are going to affect a lot of people down the road. Now, I don't think this show is fighting the patriarchy. Don't think it's particularly empowering to women. I don't think it reflects our faith particularly well. But like I said, I think there's some high points. I think it has potential for missionary growth. I think it has the potential for people to just get curious about Latter-day Saints. And in some ways, I feel like these girls got scammed into selling their personal lives, their family, their faith in the name of empowering women, only to play into the games of a lot of male executives at a TV streaming service who didn't really have their best interests at heart. I hope that every girl on that show knows that God loves them. God loves all of his children, including every single one of the girls on that show. And one of the big themes of season 2 was getting second chances. Whitney was a villain in season 1. She's kind of had a redemption arc in season 2. Zach, the same thing. There's been a couple of those. And ultimately, that is the message of the atonement of Jesus Christ, that no matter how bad we mess up, no matter how many times we screw up, how many mistakes we make, even just really, really bad mistakes, if we draw close unto Jesus Christ, he will forgive us, he will heal us, and he will love us. I mean, he does love us. So that is my massive brain dump on everything I thought about Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, the good, the bad, the very ugly. I want to know what you think in the comments. Is Secret Lives of Mormon Wives good for the church or not?